Have you ever wondered if you should purchase travel insurance? Well, I have a guest this weekend that stayed with me named Mr. Milo, and we did a lot of research on whether you should purchase travel insurance for your next vacation. So if you're interested to hear what we found out, stick around. Right, Milo? You can tell he's excited. Well, let's go over some scenarios that will help you see how travel insurance can actually be very beneficial. So the first story I read about recently was a young couple in their 20s that went to Italy for their honeymoon. And of course, there was bad luck. They were crossing a main street. Her husband got hit by a crazy Italian driver. And what happened? Well, he fractured a ton of bones, was in the hospital for a few weeks there in Italy. But luckily, she had purchased insurance, and she wrote on her blog, the wife, that she was so glad she had purchased it for a small amount of money. It saved them thousands of dollars. So you can imagine that scenario, right? Another story I read about was a couple that was cruising in the Bahamas who didn't get travel insurance. They were not so lucky. This was over the holidays a few years ago. Her husband ended up having a stroke. Quite a few strokes actually on the cruise ship. They needed to take him over to Bahamas to a hospital, but because of the hurricanes that they had just recently had in 2018, they ended up not being able to provide the assistance they needed at the hospital there in Bahamas. So they wanted to transport him to another hospital there on the island. So you can imagine how much money that is. They only had $20 with them. So you can imagine their stress and their worries where they had no money to provide. They didn't have travel insurance. Their daughter created a GoFundMe page, and luckily they were able to provide enough funds to where they could actually be released. And actually, I don't even think the funds helped. It was a great Good Samaritan from North Carolina that actually, because it was over the holidays, decided to bail them out and be able to fly them back to the US where they could finish off the treatments that he needed. So that's a huge loss for this couple. Can you imagine? They were out of pocket like $20,000 or more because of an unexpected illness while they were traveling. Now, other scenarios where you would need assistance with travel insurance where it becomes beneficial is, let's say you're on a trip and you're actually in the middle of your vacation, you get a phone call and you find out that one of your family members is severely sick. You need to fly back immediately to the US or wherever you're at. Well, travel insurance will help with that. You won't lose the cost of the rest of your hotel stay or changing your flight fees. Also, let's say you're in the middle of your vacation, you're in an island like the Caribbean somewhere, and a hurricane comes out of nowhere and you have to evacuate. If you have travel insurance, that will also help with those expenses. Now, sometimes you have to read the fine lines. It might only take you to somewhere, another island close by, but there's some plans that provide you assistance to get you all the way back home without you having to pay out of pocket. So you can see how there are various scenarios that are really, really helpful with travel insurance. Not to mention if you get sick before your trip and you actually have to cancel your trip. There's a lot of really neat vacation rentals or cabins that are non-refundable, so you would lose your whole entire trip, your cost. So that would be out of pocket for you. Can you imagine? You don't even get to go on vacation and you have to pay those expenses out of pocket. So another great reason to have travel insurance. Of course, it has to be a covered reason. It can't be like, oh, I don't want to go anymore, unless you have cancel for any reason. Now, there aren't as many plans nowadays after COVID that have the cancel for any reason plan, but there are still a few, and you're lucky if you work with a travel advisor, as they can assist you with which suppliers carry those plans. And those are wonderful because let's say you aren't comfortable going somewhere because you hear a few weeks before traveling that there's a political crisis or there's another virus, another something happening like COVID, you can cancel your trip. Or you get in a fight with the person that you're going on the trip with. Let's say it's your best friend, or it's a girl's trip or a guy's trip, and you guys just, something happens and you don't get along anymore. You can cancel the trip. So it's a little bit more of a cost, but it's definitely worth it because you can basically cancel for any reason. Another scenario that travel insurance can come in handy, and you can see a pattern here, it's specifically medical is really important nowadays because you never know what could happen. There was a travel blogger who was in Canada and hiking with her friends. One of her friends unfortunately hurt himself, fell, sprained their ankle, and had to be care flighted to the nearest emergency room. So, as you can see, that would be thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket if they didn't have travel insurance. Now, I will say, definitely check your current insurance policy to see what it covers, as well as your credit card company. Some credit card companies do have travel insurance, but it doesn't cover very much. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm good, I've got credit card travel insurance from my credit card company, but in reality, it doesn't even cover that much. So if something happens, you end up having to pay out of pocket. Now, some of those credit card companies that you pay high annual fees for are much better, like those $500, $200 to $500 annual fee credit cards. Typically, those have a little bit more coverage than your typical credit card. But always make sure, check your credit card and then check the travel insurance supplier to see the difference, because you definitely want to make sure you're covered, especially nowadays in the crazy times we live in. Travel insurance, I can't speak enough of it. It's important. You also might want to consider purchasing travel insurance through a third-party supplier, because what happens if a tour operator, such as a cruise line, goes bankrupt? Well, you won't be able to recoup your funds, right? But if you go with a larger travel insurance company such as Allianz, Roamrite, CSA, Travel Insured, these companies are larger and most likely won't go bankrupt, so you'll be able to recoup your funds. The wonderful thing about working with a travel advisor is that we can provide different quotes from different vendors that we work with, such as CSA, Travel Insured, Allianz, Roamrite, and then you can see which plan works the best for you depending on what coverage you might already have with your credit card or your current company's benefits, whatever plan you're on, and then compare those, because that's really important. Most of these plans will come with trip interruption, trip delays, if you've missed your flight or you lose your baggage. So there's definitely that included along with your medical, but definitely make sure you are looking at these plans closely, because you don't want something to happen like I've mentioned previously in the video about these couples that are traveling abroad and don't have insurance, or they end up hurting themselves and have to wait weeks in order to come back to the US. So hopefully you've gained a little bit more information on today's Travel Tip Tuesday. Be sure to follow Luxury Meets Travel on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And if there are any topics or destinations or travel discussions or travel tips that you'd like to hear more about, be sure and comment below. Right, Milo?